Again, thank you so much for joining us today. We're thrilled to welcome you to a webinar which is going to present new tools in the INEE Measurement Library focused on assessing holistic learning outcomes. So my name is Sonia Anderson, and I lead INEE's work on data and evidence. And I'm just going to share a very brief introduction and then hand it over to our data and measurement coordinator, David Kunyu, who is going to co-chair this webinar alongside Karma Al-Hassan, who is our fabulous Measurement Library Reference Group co-chair as well. So just by way of a brief introduction, the INEE Measurement Library serves as a core area of INEE's offering to our members on data and evidence. It's focused on the collection of measurement tools to assess children's holistic learning and development, as well as service provision and the quality of service provision in crisis contexts. So the tools are really meant to help education practitioners generate high quality data to inform programming and planning. And we do this through a rigorous process by convening members through a reference group who peer review the quality of the tools. There's much more information which will be shared throughout, and David will share a bit more of an introduction, but we're thrilled to have you with us today. And I'll hand it over to David now. Thanks, David.
Thank you so much, Sonia, for that introduction. Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, my name is David Kunyu. I'm the Data and Measurement Coordinator at INEE. I work alongside Sonia.
David, the voice is low. Can we have it raised a bit?
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that a bit better?
That's better.
Thank you so much, Kalma. Yeah, so I was saying that welcome everyone, and we are thrilled to have all of us, all of you joining us in this webinar session. And for an agenda, we will start off, of course, with just welcome and introductions. And today we are going to welcome our new co-chair. And then, of course, I'll just provide a brief overview of the objectives of the measurement library, which, of course, I'm happy Sonia has already mentioned. And then in the order of the agenda, we will have Ariel present the WorkLinks skills and values assessment tool, followed by a teacher classroom observation tool by Autumn. And then we'll have Alison follow with social and emotional competence assessment. Then Micheal and colleagues will present organizational capacity for community-based problem solving. And Sylvia and Cohere will close our presentations with 4 scales measuring teacher well-being. And of course, we are hoping to have at least 10 minutes in the end, or 15, hopefully, to be able to attend to the Q&A. Next slide, please. Yeah, so as I alluded earlier on, today we are very much privileged to welcome a new co-chair, Karma Al-Hassan. When the measurement library was established, we've had a privilege of our measurement library partner, the NYU Global Ties, supporting with co-chairing of the work of the measurement library, is a rotational role or responsibility. And this time around, it has rotated out of NYU Global Ties for Children. And we are happy to have Karma Al-Hassan joining us from American University of Beirut as our next co-chair. Karma is a professor of measurement and evaluation in education, and she's done extensive work in this area, and we are so much looking forward to have her support this work and to see that the measurement library make further progress as envisioned in the sustainability plan that is in place. So I would like to welcome Karma to say a few things before we move to the next items.
Thank you, David, and good afternoon or good morning or good evening to everybody. It's my pleasure to be with you today and my pleasure to start my term as co-chair of the Measurement Library at the INEE. I'm a professor of educational psychology, measurement, and evaluation at the American University of Beirut, Lebanon. And my work has been extensively because of the need in this area, in the Middle East and in the Arab region, for tools that are validated in the region and that in Arabic, and to meet several needs. My work has been extensively focusing on development and adaptation and validation of tools for use in the Arab region. And so, and of course, on assessment and quality and, all the dimensions related to assessment and evidence-based learning and so on. And so when I got this request to co-chair the Measurement Library, I really welcomed it because it will really introduce me to other beautiful work and excellent work that's going around in areas that really need these good tools, these good assessment tools. And it's really my pleasure and honor to serve as co-chair of the Measurement Library. And I look forward to getting to know more of you and to learn more about your work and to be able to contribute positively to the development of this library. Thank you, David. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Karma. We appreciate that. Thank you so much, everyone. And Sonia, will you move to the next slide, please? Yeah, just for an overview of the Measurement Library objectives, of course, in 2019 established as a joint initiative between INEE, IRC, and NYU Global Ties for Children, with an overarching aim of peer reviewing, publishing peer-reviewed measurement tools for focusing on holistic learning outcomes of children in crisis and low resource contexts. And of course, the Measurement Library does places 2 calls every year, inviting potential developers to submit tools to be considered for publication in the Measurement Library. And this work is supported by, through a comprehensive process, of course, supported by the Measurement Library Reference Group. And I would like, of course, to equally appreciate the developers, especially because they are always at the center of that process. And for all of you presenting your tools today, we are looking forward, of course, to learning a lot from your work. And we also appreciate you for cooperating with the Measurement Library Reference Group to make this happen. Without further ado, I think I would love to welcome our first presenter to share her screen. Ariel, please go ahead and share your screen. So as she does that,
working on it.
Okay, that's okay. I'll introduce you then as you work on it. So Ariel Slack is a senior monitoring and evaluation specialist at WorkLinks. And today she's going to discuss with us the WorkLinks skills and values assessment measure, which they tested with data from a study with youth in Algeria. That's West Africa, Northwest Africa, I think. Yeah. Welcome, Ariel. We are ready.
Thank you. All right, can you guys see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yes, we
can. You see the presentation version, not my notes.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect.
Looks great.
So for brevity's sake, moving forward, as David mentioned, the tool is called the WorkLinks Skills and Values Assessment. I will be referring to it as the WLSVA. So just a tiny bit about World Learning. We're a nonprofit global development and exchange organization that delivers education programs in more than 150 countries over the last 90 years, working to enhance the capacity and commitment of individuals, institutions, and communities to create a more peaceful and just world through education and sustainable development. So this tool creation began in late 2019, piloting of it began in 2020, and it was validated in July of 2020. So the WSVA is a validated, credible and reliable tool to measure individual and group level change over a period of time, specifically among youth and young adults in the areas of soft skills, earning skills, and certain civic values. The impetus of the tool creation was to measure outcome level indicators focused on tracking the number of individuals with improved entrepreneurial attitudes and soft skills as part of the Algeria Entrepreneurship and Employment Project, which was funded by the Department of State's Middle East Partnership Initiative. And we worked in partnership with the Algerian Center for Social Entrepreneurship. The tool's creation began by a team in WorldLinks DC headquarters, while the validation process was conducted in Algeria in Algerian French, and the tool has subsequently been used in other countries, and it's currently available on WorldLinks website in English, French, Algerian Arabic, Iraqi Arabic, and Kurdish. So a little bit about the development and the process of the psychometric validation. So it began with a literature review, which drew on existing validated items from assessments that focused on positive youth development, youth leadership, and youth development, as well as some of our firsthand experience. As a result, the first draft identified 11 soft skills that were critical for youth to find and retain work, as well as 2 skill sets for earning a livelihood, and 4 value constructs, which reflected WorldLinks core institutional values and ultimately became the civic values. The original tool comprised 61 questions to measure these skills and values. Our Algerian female and male program staff then did the initial translation separately and then met to reconcile any differences. To adapt the tool to make sure it was appropriately youth-friendly, given the target demographic, we met with 17 Algerian youth over 4 different focus group discussions to review, discuss, and improve the Algerian French version our staff made. During these focus groups, a total of 88 revisions were suggested by youth on about 59% of the questions. Of the 3 sets of information needed from youth, comprehension, retrieval, judgment, virtually all the suggestions were related to comprehension. So then our Algerian staff incorporated the suggestions and recommendations from those focus groups and finalized the French version of the WSVA tool for pilot testing. Our pilot test also collected respondent data on gender, age, the site of the tool administration, and the time it took respondents to complete the tool. In the pilot in early January 2020, we had 128 Algerian youth, about 54% female, 46% male, ranging from 16 to 36 years of age in 4 cities across Algeria, complete a paper version of the tool after giving informed consent. Upon review of the pilot test results, we decided to reduce the number of constructs to only those with high reliability based on a Cronbach alpha coefficient of 0.70 or greater. So that guided the revision of the tool, which ultimately led to reducing the previous 11 skill constructs to the 6 skill constructs, the final 6 skill constructs you will see on the next slide, as well as eliminating 21 questions. We also combined a couple of constructs into one. Unfortunately, for the final retest and reliability, we had to pivot slightly due to COVID. So the retest took place in the end of May to end of June, 68% female, 32% males, with a 1-week interval between administration, and the tool was administered online rather than in person as a result of COVID. So the final WSVA tool consisted of 56 statements, all with Likert scale response questions. And the average time it took a student to complete, or excuse me, participant to complete was about 15 minutes. So you'll see we ended up with soft skills, which has 5 skill constructs, earning skills, which has 2 skill constructs, and civic values, which were previously referred to as world learning organizational values, which has 4 skills constructs. One of the really great things about this tool is that each of these indices can actually be used individually. For instance, if you were working in a project where you only needed to measure soft skills and you don't really care about earning skills or civic values, you can pull the questions assigned to that index out from the entire tool itself and only utilize those. If you were to use the full tool and all 56 questions, the full tool reliability is 0.94, which is considered excellent. So this is kind of just a brief highlight from the report. And just a quick look at with each specific construct's breakdown of their Cronbach alpha. We also took a look at testing the tool for gender bias, and we're pleased to find no significant gender differences. Both the soft skills scores and civic value scales are consistently gender neutral, with no significant difference in scores between the genders on either the pre-test or the post-test. And actually, I apologize, taking a step back, something I think I failed to mention in the beginning is the way the tool is distributed. It is used as a pre-test and post-test, so you distribute it as a baseline prior to program participation, and then again at the end for program participation. So pretty important piece I think I forgot to mention. I apologize. So the one area where we did notice a slight gender difference in results is on pre-program earning skills, where females showed significantly lower skills than males. But we think that that is potentially explained by the social context of Algeria, where women are less encouraged to join the labor force and may have had less an opportunity to develop their work-related skills. And we were pleased to note that the gender difference in earning skills disappears by the post-test. So we believe the implication of that is that these programs helped young women catch up in their job search and entrepreneurial skills, with both males and females attaining higher and almost equal scores by program end. As a result, also, females experienced a higher percent change in their scores from pre-test to post-test than young men. And more women than men showed significant change in earning skills, which, since they're starting from a lower baseline, could potentially make sense. So this is kind of a bit of an efficacy outline of how the relation of WSVA results and how effective the learning is based on exposure to the content, that the WSVA was designed to measure. So we had 3 projects that we've used this tool on since it's been developed, 3 different training interventions, and all 3 programs used a similar curriculum. Due to COVID-19, they all had to rely on Zoom meetings for group activities with self-study in between sessions. The one thing to note is that they were different lengths. Project A was on a 5-week period, Project B was 8 weeks, and Project C was 8 months. We used contact hours multiplied by the duration of weeks for a proxy of program quality to determine if the WSVA score outcomes are higher, as would be expected with higher quality programs. And that helped contribute to WSVA's ability to assess program effectiveness and not just individuals. So the result of comparing the 3 programs showed that there was a statistically significant difference in skill score improvement on the full WSVA between programs, with the highest contact and longest duration program, Project C, showing the highest average skill score improvement on the full WSVA, 15.2%, compared to Project A, which only had 4.2%. So, and I think I'm running over time, so I will skip a little more there. So we also have noted relationships of WSVA scores to employment outcomes. The difference in mean scores between those and those who do and do not have lifetime employment experience is positive and statistically significant. Those who previously have had no employment experience or who were unemployed at the time they started the program were more likely to improve their scores across several dimensions. This is just a bit about how if you wanted to use the tool in a language or context in which it has previously not been used, this is just, the tool goes a bit more into, the tool resources in the library go a bit more in depth on this. But this is the process that we recommend, which follows kind of a simplified version of what I explained earlier about how we piloted the tool. We do really recommend revalidating the tool in new or significantly different contexts. Obviously, you can use it without validating it in new context, but that affects how reliable the data you're going to get is. So we do recommend calculating a Cronbach's alpha for each score and measurement error, finding the smallest real difference in the new context you would use it in. Considerations for future use of the tool: 3 constructs in the soft skills index: goal setting and perseverance, managing emotions, and intercultural understanding and empathy require slightly more refining to reach a better level of reliability, to get their Cronbach alpha just a bit slightly to 0.70. The focus of this refining based on our results should be among youth with the lowest reliabilities of these constructs, which were males, but especially younger males. Although common for self-report surveys, we did see a ceiling effect, particularly in the constructs of social justice and inclusion and goal setting and perseverance. So we would recommend the current questions may need to be slightly revised and made more demanding, or possibly using a retrospective pre-test approach when using the tool with youth. And then just being very cautious when you use the tool and analyze your results, because although a statistically significant increase may occur at endline when compared to baseline, it may not represent meaningful change. For instance, when you apply the statistical test of significance with individual constructs and using grouped constructs, just be sure that you're considering the smallest real difference in order to confirm that you're using the tool and reporting on its results correctly.
Yeah, will you kindly wrap up, Ariel?
I'm sorry, David?
I was asking you to wrap up.
Well, perfect.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ariel. Yeah, just on time.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ariel, for your presentation. So for those of you who have questions about Ariel's work, WorkLinks skills, value assessment tool, Rebecca, please include your questions in the Q&A, and we will have Ariel come back to respond to those questions. We will move to our next presenter. I think you can stop sharing. Thank you so much. We can have our next presenter share their screen. And that's Autumn Brown. Autumn is actually a researcher at the University of Pennsylvania, and she will be discussing with us today the teacher classroom observation measure using data from a study with teachers in Tanzanian schools. Welcome, Autumn.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. Unfortunately, my colleague and friend, Jungmin, can't be here today. We are both former IRC employees, so although we're presenting on behalf of IRC, I'm currently at the University of Pennsylvania and she's at the University of Notre Dame, and yeah, happy to be talking about this work. So I'm going to go over the background of the teacher classroom observation instrument, what's included in the instrument, the training materials. I'm quickly going to go over some of the psychometric properties and what we found in our validation of the instrument and recommendations going forward. So this started in 2016 when we were working on a multi-site RCT evaluating the effectiveness of IRC's Learning in a Healing Classrooms approach. And while the vast majority of our education programming focuses on improving teacher practice, we really lacked an accurate way of measuring teacher practice. As you know, I'm sure many of you know, observations are so hard. They're hard, they're expensive, they're time consuming. It's really difficult to do them well. But we really also at the same time needed it. So we started on this long journey to develop the teacher classroom observation instrument. We started looking at different versions of observation instruments that were being used across our programs to kind of see what they had in common, because if they were assessing teacher practice using the Learning in a Healing Classroom curriculum, there would be commonalities. And we ended up using a version that had been originally developed in Lebanon and then started to test it. We tested it in several different countries and refined it. And then the version that I'm going to be talking about today, and that's included in the measurement library, is a version that we used in Tanzania. Another ambitious kind of goal of the teacher classroom observation tool when we first started using it was to be able to use it for a multitude of purposes, something that you could use for research, but also for monitoring and coaching. The version that I'm sharing and I'm going to talk about today is meant to be a rigorous way for practitioners to assess teacher practice. But in the training materials, which I'll also talk about, there's guidance on how to adapt the training for some different purposes. The instrument itself includes 4 main dimensions. There's a time on task, teaching practice, classroom management practices, and emotional supportiveness. And it has what this practice is defined as, and then on a scale of 1 to 4, what that might look like in the classroom. The training that was done, the kind of final training, because the training materials themselves went through probably more iteration than the tool itself, because we really, really wanted to do it well in a short amount of time. So the training that is in the measurement library is based on a training that we did in the Nyarugusu refugee camp in Tanzania. And we trained refugee enumerators over the course of 2.5 days. The last half day, excuse me, was field testing. So, and we were able to achieve high iterator reliability in this short amount of time. And I really think this is partly due because before the training, we did shoot videos in classrooms using iPads, and we used those during the training to practice rating using the instrument. So I think that was definitely a big part of it. And then we continuously tested the inter-rater agreement throughout the training, and 9 enumerators who were scoring close to each other and the master trainer were selected as raters, or 6 were selected as raters in the end. And then very quickly after the training, the data collection was happening. The training package includes a facilitator's guide that has step-by-step instructions on how to facilitate the training. It's PowerPoints, handouts, and guidance. It also has guidance on how to test inter-rater reliability while, like, during the training, and has an Excel sheet that can help you do this. So please, yeah, take a look at these training materials. So the data for our validation study was 143 teachers, and we had 2 raters in each classroom that were sitting away from each other, and then we used their 2 different observations to understand the inter-rater reliability. For our analysis and our understanding of the functioning of the instrument, we looked at the item distributions, the inter-rater agreement, and the validity, the construct validity and reliability. There were a couple items that were worrisome right off the bat. You can see here that they are very skewed. And in our final recommendations, which you can find in the evidence report, these are items that we recommend dropping or adapting. We found acceptable and even high inter-rater agreement across all these items. We also found a 3-factor model. So this is looking at teaching practice, classroom practice, or classroom management practices and emotional support. We found that 3-factor model to hold up, but here you can see the kind of list of items that we recommend either adapting or dropping from the instrument. There's strong evidence of construct validity, and you can see the construct reliability here. Next steps. So while the TCO instrument, in conjunction with the training materials, shows promise, more needs to be done to understand how it's functioning. And this includes, if other people start using, which we definitely hope they do, that adaptations include proper translation with cognitive protesting and back translation, as well as a training that does include some testing of the inter-rater reliability. Without that, comparing teacher scores across different raters is not recommended. The IRC also is, I believe, and those from the IRC can speak better on this, but is developing an updated teacher classroom observation tool that is going through its own rigorous psychometric testing, followed up on this work. So please stay tuned for that. And yeah, I think as a main takeaway, if you look at the instrument, and even if the items don't match the exact competencies that you're trying to teach teachers in your program, I think that teams can gain a lot from these training materials. So please do take a look at them, and feel free to reach out to me or Jungmin if you have any questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Atom. Thank you so much for sharing the insights of this really wonderful tool. I think we'll have our next presenter. So if you have questions for Autumn, please include them in the chat, and we'll have her back in the end to respond to your questions. So we'll have Alison next. Alison is an Education in Emergencies Thematic Expert at the Geneva Graduate Institute, and she's going to discuss with us today the Social and Emotional Competency Assessment Report, which she tested using data from a study conducted with teachers in Kenya. Welcome, Alison.
Thank you very much, David, and welcome everybody, and very glad to see such good participation. So as David has just said, the Social and Emotional Competency Assessment was adapted and used by teachers as part of an action research project that I facilitated for my EdD doctoral research in a small rural primary school in Kwale County, Kenya in 2019. So a much smaller project than the other two contexts which we've been hearing from. And in 7 minutes, I'm going to present the why for whom, what, how, and so what of the SEICO tool. And so I'll conclude with some reflections and ways forward after presenting evidence and some limitations. So starting with the why and for whom. The context for this tool was the introduction of the competency-based curriculum in Kenya, which was launched as a pilot in 2017. And in the infographic, we can see the structure of the KCBC with the 7 competencies at the bottom, providing the foundation for values and principles, which help achieve the vision and mission of the new curriculum. Teachers, especially at the start of the process of the introduction of the curriculum, needed support to understand how to infuse the competencies of the new curriculum into their lessons, and then how to measure them. So the SACRE tool was piloted in the study to measure 4 of the 7 competencies of the curriculum, which are arguably key ones for foundational learning outcomes: self-efficacy, communication and collaboration, critical thinking and problem solving, and learning to learn. And I think it's interesting to see that we see a lot of overlap in the what were described as soft skills in the first tool that we saw presented, which is for much older children, much older people in a vocational training context. And this was done at primary school level with grades 1 to 3 in this context. So the tool as it looks now was adapted and contextualized from the social and emotional competency parent and teacher rating scale, which had been developed by RTI International in Mtwara region of southern Tanzania, which has comparable social and economic characteristics to the coast of Kenya, where this study was carried out. The tool, as it is now, is teacher-led, based on teacher observation and assessment of individual children. It measures 4 competencies through 20 questions, 5 questions per competency. And so in terms of the statistics around the tool, the factor analysis showed strong internal consistency and therefore reliability, particularly the questions for self-efficacy, which work together particularly well, with an eigenvalue of around 2 in each case in both rounds, and Cronbach alphas of around 8, which is strong reliability. The other 3 scales for the other 3 competencies had eigenvalues of around 1 and alphas of between 0.5 and 0.7. So less strong, but bearing in mind that this was small numbers of questions, so more difficult to get strong reliability. The context for adapting and revising the tool, so moving on to how it was developed and adapted through the process, was action research that teachers conducted, trying out ways to support one selected competency at a time in their lessons. And in the picture we see, for example, in this activity, the teacher was aiming to support communication and collaboration skills in a maths lesson. Learners are developing route maps to show position and the directions of different places, such as how can you get to hospital from home, or which direction is the mosque from the church. And this is what it looked like in this picture when teachers actually used the tool. They assessed each learner on the 4-point scale over a 2 to 3 day period at 2 data points, noting the results on paper. In the initial RTI tool, there were 23 questions, and in this study, there were up to 84 learners per grade in grade 1. So this made data collection quite an onerous process for teachers. The organization of the tool now, following factor analysis, into 4 sets of 5 questions makes it more user-friendly, and with the potential also to focus on one set of questions or competency at a time, so just 5 questions. The three of the questions in the original tool, the RTI tool, were excluded for lack of variance. And so then factor analysis grouped the remaining 20 questions into 4 sets, each with a predominant underlying trait or competency, as you can see on the left-hand side here. Almost all of the questions had a factor loading of above 0.4 in at least one round, which shows reasonable internal validity. And then we can see, if we look more closely at the questions, the most important characteristics for each competency based on factor loading. And these are easily recognizable behaviors for teachers. For example, respect for others when talking, ability to give unique responses. And then in the learning to learn set of competencies at the bottom, we see relatively simple executive function and executive control skills, the ability to filter out distractions, remain calm, follow school rules, which builds in the other competencies to the higher order skills. For example, being happy to answer first or help a struggling colleague. So moving on to the so what, what's the evidence that we can gain from the use of this tool in this small study? This slide illustrates both the encouraging results, but also the major limitation of the use of the tool so far in this study, which is the small sample size. Only 187 children were assessed because it was a very small study with just myself as the researcher, which obviously limits the confidence with which we can treat the results. Nevertheless, we can see significant change across grades and across all 4 competencies, with up to 25% increase in scores for communication and collaboration and learning to learn between rounds 1 and 2. And there were 19% and 14% increases respectively in self-efficacy and critical thinking and problem solving. There was variation between the grades in these progressions. For example, the least progression was seen in grade 3, but those older children came from a higher base, and so age was clearly playing a role there. Teacher subjectivity was also a factor, because we had very limited time for discussion on how to interpret the questions and for doing inter-rater reliability. Secondly, one of the findings of the RTI school tool was that behaviors reflected in questions grouped under the trait obedience, as they structured it for that tool, were valued more by rural parents and the community than by teachers. And so the analysis of that tool argued that this could disadvantage children from rural areas in formal education contexts, because the competency that's valued at home is not reflected in school activities. But the contextualization and reorganization of the tool in SECA shows that for the KCBC, at least, these social competencies of obedience contribute to 2 of the competencies in the new curriculum. For example, the ability to respond nicely and to respect others when they're talking builds communication and collaboration skills. So we can argue here that competency-based curricula help to bridge the gap between more traditional, less formally educated communities and the school environment, valuing the skills that parents value when complemented by others such as critical thinking and problem solving and self-efficacy. Finally, significant correlations were found between almost all of the competencies, illustrating the interconnected nature of the acquisition of social and emotional skills. In other words, if you can build children's ability in one competency, you're very likely to be building it also in another competency. And that's what those correlations show. And then secondly, the significant correlations between 3 out of the 4 competencies and the reading and maths results. So that was those were assessed in parallel for grade 3 students through EGMA and EGMA. That shows the integral connection between social and emotional skills and core academic learning outcomes. So to conclude, there are 3 key takeaways I would like to highlight. Firstly, the tool responds to the need for teacher-administered tools, which has been identified in the literature. And in this case, for a tool that can support the assessment of 4 core competencies with as few as 5 questions at a time. And then that process of exploring the way in which children are learning these competencies empowers teachers. That was the word that those teachers used themselves. Through this explicit exploration and measurement of the competencies. They felt better about their teaching of the KCBC as a result of this process. And finally, the tool can be used to provide evidence for the fact that social and emotional learning is at the heart of foundational learning outcomes. It's not an add-on. And in this case, supporting better results in reading and maths, but generally supporting those academic so-called basic skills, and that we need those social and emotional skills and to focus on building them as part of building those basics and that foundational learning. So in conclusion, there are limitations in the small sample size of this research study, and there's certainly need for more work on training with teachers and inter-rater reliability. But there's much potential for larger scale use and contextualization. So if I've piqued your interest, I would love to hear from you, and please get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Alison, for that wonderful presentation. So much to learn from this work. Yeah, please keep posting your questions for Alison in the chat. She'll have time to respond later. So we will have our next presenter. We'll have Micheal present the organizational capacity for community-based problem-solving measure. Micheal is our program lead at Cohere, together with colleagues from NYU Global Ties. They are going to share or rather discuss with us the mentioned tool, which they actually is tested with the data from a study conducted in East Africa. Welcome, Micheal.
Thank you so much, David. Again, my name is Micheal. Micheal Gumisiriza, and I work with Cohere. Cohere is an international non-government organization which is working with refugee-led organizations in a number of countries in Africa, mainly in East Africa. The tool that I'm going to present today was developed by Cohere in partnership with colleagues from the NYU Global Ties for Children. So Cohere, as I said, is an international non-government organization, and our mission centers on amplifying the voices of community-based refugee leaders, whom we view as experts in program design, research, and advocacy. We aim to rethink traditional expertise in program design and research, especially for projects which aim at improving education and livelihoods in the Global South, because for a long time, in international development, research, policy, and practice have long been dominated by a small set of actors from the Global North. And today, there are increasing calls to center the voices of local actors, as well as reconsidering who is considered as an expert. And at Cohere, we believe that refugee communities are the experts, and that's why we basically work with them to ensure that they get the support that they need to identify and implement solutions that address the community needs. The tool that I'm going to talk about today is known as the Organizational Capacity for Community-Based Problem Solving. And this tool focuses specifically on the capacity of the refugee-led organization staff to support community-based problem solving using participatory approaches. Traditionally, organizational capacity has been identified by the organization's ability to implement programs and the resources that it has, such as human resource, infrastructure, and data. However, for this particular measurement tool that we developed, it assesses the capacity of refugee-led organization staff to engage in and support community-based problem solving. And our tool focuses specifically on one specific dimension of capacity, which is the Ariel staff capacity to address the needs of the community using participatory approaches. To give you a brief overview of the structure of our measure. So the organizational capacity for community-based problem solving has 4 subscales, which are the subscale of community knowledge, which looks at the ease with which refugee-led organization employees can understand and identify the needs and challenges of the community. Then we've got the second, which is critical thinking, that aims to look at the ease with which refugee-led organization employees can identify, examine, and prioritize challenges faced by their community. Participation, which looks at the ease with which refugee-led organization employees are able to include community members and adapt their planning according to the interests and feedback from the community. And lastly, the subscale of addressing problems, which looks at the ease with which refugee-led employees can collect information and harness community resources to resolve challenges faced by the community. I'll talk about the the process that we did go through when we were developing this measure. So the tool was developed through an iterative and collaborative process. And again, as I said, the tool is principally aimed at enhancing program monitoring and evaluation. The process of developing this tool took 9 months. It was through a 9-month course that aimed at adopting measures of holistic learning outcomes for use in crisis contexts. And particularly, this process involved a number of steps. The first one was definition of outcomes, in which we identified the tool's intended goal. Then we also had we had to pass through a process of developing an item bank, which basically resulted in a pool of around 61 items, and these were mainly assembled from 3 measures that we came across through basic research. These were mainly the capacity for community-based initiatives, the community ownership scale, and the collective leadership scale. However, after doing this item bank compilation, none of the items were able to capture all the 4 subscales that we were aiming to measure in the organizational capacity for community-based problem solving, and none of these had been designed to capture the capacity of Ariel staff, specifically in East Africa, to engage in participatory approaches while seeking to solve community problems. So we decided to develop a new measure that would suit our organizational monitoring and program and evaluation needs, and one that would suit our context. When we were developing the tool, we were mindful of the social desirability bias, as the survey was targeting refugee-led organization staff who are already working with Cohere. So we did put in place a number of measures to ensure that we minimize this bias, and which included asking respondents whether the activities were easy or hard, rather than how well they did them. We also used the neutral phrasing to normalize responses, such as some staff find this easy while others find it hard. We also employed scaffolded responses and also conducted cognitive interviews with non-refugee-led organization staff to ensure clarity of the questions in the survey. We also made sure that the survey was available in both English and Kiswahili, although English was the primary language of the responses. So in terms of piloting the measure, when we were developing the survey, we piloted it in November 2022 with 95 refugee-led organization employees across 19 organizations using an online survey. And the questions were basically requiring staff to rate the ease of doing tasks on a scale of really hard to really easy. And the score was on a 4-point Likert scale. And we used Kobo and employed a password protection and encryption strategies to safeguard the data. And the survey was completed by Ariel staff using either personal smartphones or computers at the refugee-led organizations' internet hubs or computer hubs. The preliminary findings, the early results supported the hypothesized structure of the organizational capacity for community-based problem solving, and the data, after it had been processed, we were able to come up with findings that showed that all items were skewed with ceiling effects, as participants generally found the focal tasks kind of easy. And the hypothesized four-factor model, which allowed for correlations between factors, demonstrated an acceptable to good fit. And all items had standardized factor loadings greater than 0.60, but the factors were highly correlated, indicating that alternative models such as one factor or second order model could be considered with further data. We also need to caution that our sample size was small, so we weren't able to do the recommended exploratory factor analysis or confirmatory factor analysis and key factor analysis, but we did use our priori assumptions to hypothesize the measure structure, and we did conduct the confirmatory factor analysis. In terms of next steps, moving forward, we believe that spending more time with refugee leaders to understand and get deeper insights into what their capacity to engage the community really looks like, as well as expanding the sample size and testing the Kiswahili version, as well as conducting additional psychometric testing are recommended to improve the measure. And this could be worth exploring in future further refinement of the measure. I thank you. I beg to stop here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael, for the presentation. Thank you so much for sharing with us the insights of this tool. It's one of the tools that I like a lot. So we'll have our next and our last presenter. Sorry, everyone, we've gone beyond our time. I would request that we stay for Cohere to present the tool. And thank you so much for being patient. I appreciate that. So our next and last presentation will be by Cohere and Sylvia from the International Rescue Committee. Cohere, you can go ahead and share your screen. And they will be discussing with us the 4 scales measuring teacher well-being using data from a study with Nigerian school teachers. Welcome, Cohere.
Thank you, David. I would like to confirm you're seeing the presentation right now.
Yes, you're good to go.
Okay, excellent. Greetings, everyone. I'll try to be brief and to the point. This is a study on the psychometric properties of 4 scales that we use to measure teacher well-being. This evidence comes from Northeast Nigeria in the context of a program to help low-performing students in schools in North Nigeria. So I'm not going to go into the details on some details because of the time and because I think it's quite a number of scales. I'm just going to give you first an overview of this study. This study provides psychometric evidence for these 4 scales. Teacher well-being is a multidimensional construct, and there is some sort of ongoing discussion about its nature in the literature. So even at the conceptual stage, it is not that there are contradictions, but there are many factors involved in teacher well-being, so that makes measuring this construct particularly challenging. So we consider this, as you see in number 3, an important initial step in building a strong body of empirical evidence for measuring teacher well-being. One thing I would like to mention before going further is that an important contribution of this study is that it's focused on teacher well-being. There are not that many resources in the INEE library on this specific subject. Last time I checked, I mean, feel free to correct me, there are new resources, but at the time we conducted this study, this was one of the few or very few tools available to measure teacher well-being in the library. So there are a number of definitions of teacher well-being. There are definitions of well-being, as you can see in the first line there. Teacher well-being needs some customization because it's not general well-being. It's well-being related to the teaching profession. We have some relatively recent materials from the Education Equity Research Initiative, where they conceptualize teacher well-being using a socio-ecological framework. And as you can see, it is a construct that encompasses a number of affections, attitudes, evaluations of their work about the different contexts. So there is a lot to choose from. That's what I would say as a summary of this. Why it is important to measure teacher well-being? Because there are positive relationships between teacher well-being and student learning, safety and well-being. There seems to be a negative relationship between teacher well-being and teacher turnover and absenteeism, which at face value makes sense. So we believe that for these reasons, understanding teacher well-being is critical, or is important to informing programs that support high quality education. Our analytic approach, well, this is a relatively small sample study. We have 195 participants coming from different states and communities and schools in Northeast Nigeria mostly. Teachers' mean age, as you can see here, is around 40, close to 40 years old. Percentages of female teachers vary from close to a half to less than a third in general. And we have, maybe with the exception of the community of Bait, good size of a good amount of participants in each participating school. The 4 scales that we studied are these 4 scales that you see here: self-efficacy, job satisfactions, moods and feelings, which is a scale used as a proxy for measuring depression, and burnout. So these are the 4 scales that we used. In addition to these 4 scales, we used 3 additional scales: coaching experience, social support and collaboration, and barriers to teaching, to test some hypotheses regarding convergent validity of the different constructs that we have in this scale here. These are our research questions. We wanted to know how the different scales capture variation in these dimensions of teacher well-being. We wanted to check if there was evidence of reliability, construct validity, convergent and discriminant validity, and evidence of concurrent validity. It is a relatively ambitious research agenda for this sample size. But we wanted to start gathering evidence on this and detecting possible directions for improvement in future studies, because this is going to need future research. So these are our hypotheses. There are a lot of hypotheses. I don't mean to go in detail into each one of those, but just to give you a quick overview of this, our hypothesis was that self-efficacy and job satisfaction, for example, will have a strong positive correlation, hence the large plus sinus. Whereas, for example, job satisfaction and burnout, if you're not happy with your job, you should, maybe it's because you are burnt out. So we predicted a strong negative correlation. So this kind of summarizes our hypothesis. There are, well, as you can see, more than like around 20-something hypotheses to check here regarding the strength and the direction of the correlation that we expected to see between these different constructs. What did we obtain? Regarding distributions, we saw that some of the scales show some ceiling effects. For example, teacher self-efficacy was high, job satisfaction was high, burnout was low, moods and feelings / depression was low, relatively low. The rating of the coaching experience scale was high, as well as the in social supports and collaboration, and teaching barriers was in the middle of the distribution of scales. Each individual dot represents one responded in this diagram. So we were somehow aware that there were maybe some social desirability bias here regarding, for example, job satisfaction and teaching barriers. So those are aspects that we should check in the future. We also, with the amount of data that we have, were able to detect some differences in performance or in construct levels, I should say, between the different states and communities. It seems like we have like a cluster of high burnout, high job stress, low job satisfaction, and and low coaching experience rating in this particular community. So I'm just showing you this table to emphasize the importance of disaggregating these results by geographically as much as possible. I think this helped us to identify possible points of interventions for certain communities. So this relates as patterns of response. Regarding reliabilities, we had relatively good results for all of the scales involving teacher well-being, which are the first four. You can see relatively very good reliability values. The associated scales that we used, one of them didn't perform as expected with a low reliability value of 0.57. Our inter-item correlations look good. We did some exploratory and confirmatory factor analysis with this data, and we had good fit indices with job satisfaction only, which you can see here, close to 0.99, everything about 0.95 regarding fit indices, low error with high loadings and low residuals. So that was one positive result regarding providing evidence for construct validity. All of the other scales perform well below accepted thresholds for these fit statistics. Our hypothesis and our results differ. And as you can see, these two slides show, for example, that while our prediction for correlation between, say, for example, job satisfaction and self-efficacy was a strong positively and positive correlation, we actually found a small and negative correlation. So in green here, you can see where our hypotheses were confirmed. So for example, we expected to see a positive correlation between depression and burnout, strong and positive. We find something close to that. This correlation is close to the threshold that we defined to be a high correlation, which maybe was a little too much stringent for this data. But as you can see, we had we had some misses, and we have some on-point predictions about what the correlations were going to be. This is important evidence for convergent and discriminant validity that it's useful to examine with further studies. What do we recommend here is recruit larger samples. We believe that there is an issue here of construct underrepresentation rather than construct irrelevant variance, meaning that we think that we are going in the right direction with the questions that we included in the scales, but maybe we need to go in more detail. By more detail, I mean issues, for example, like this bullet point here that speaks about adapting the job satisfaction scale to reflect aspects specific of the teaching profession. Our job satisfaction scale, for example, inquired about general issues of job satisfaction, but and it's a relatively short scale, 4 items. So there's room for improvement to get more specific and inquire about issues of the teaching profession specifically. In summary, we believe that we are providing solid initial evidence for these scales, and larger samples will allow us to conduct more in-depth studies regarding the psychometric validity of this construct. So, well, thank you, and all of your questions are welcome. I'm going to stop sharing. David, back to you.
Thank you so much, Cohere, for sharing with us this insightful tool. So we have certainly gone beyond our time. One thing is that if we do not have time for the questions and for the Q&A, we will share all the questions with the presenters. They will respond to the questions and we will share the questions with you. There is questions and responses with all of you. Unless maybe we want to just take maybe 2 questions at most. If anyone wants to raise their hand and maybe they have like a burning question that you really want someone to respond to, I think maybe we can take that.
I think, yeah, if folks are willing to stay around, but I think we probably should wrap up given that we're 15 minutes over, unfortunately. Yeah. But yes, as David mentioned, we've noted all the questions that have come in through the chat and from the Q&A. And thanks to the panelists who have answered them so far, and we'll be compiling the rest and sharing that along with the presentations and the recording on the webinar events page. So I think, yeah, apologies to quell the discussion, but given the timing, I think we want to respect everyone's time. But I think closing words, yes, from Karma, and then David, to you at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, everybody, for a very, very interesting presentations on very important constructs, from teacher, teacher observation scales to teacher well-being, skills on the job, social emotional learning, all of them really. And the presentations, although very quick, but really went into detailed, validation, construct validation, and the framework and the results. And it would have been wonderful to answer the questions and to raise some of the ways for improvement and the way forward with these. So thank you very much, and we look forward to following up on the work. David?
Yeah, thank you so much, Karma, for those kind words. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We appreciate your time, and as Sonia mentioned, we are so sorry for going over time. Yeah, but these are very interesting tools. As mentioned in the chat, they are available on the measurement library already. So feel free to get in touch with the developers as well and engage further, even as we share the questions and the responses soon that the presenters will sort of like provide. So thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time, and have a wonderful evening, a wonderful day. And we hope to see you again soon.
To the next webinar.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you,
Bye.
Karma. Thank you, David.